Hey everybody, I'm Danielle Massi and I'm back again here at 2 p.m. EST to talk about shadow work because that's what I'm doing every single week. And today we're going to talk about something that is really at the core of shadow work and also on the core of our well-being, and that's trauma. Trauma tends to have like a heaviness to it, right? Obviously, trauma has a heaviness to it, and so it's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about, like thinking about trauma that they could potentially have had, thinking about trauma as something that is normal and a part of life. Unfortunately, trauma tends to sit within our body, and not all traumas look the same. Hey Erica, not all traumas look the same. Everyone has trauma, and it just depends on how something hit you at the exact moment that it happened. Your body will process it differently. And it may process it as though it's very traumatic. It may process it as though it's mildly traumatic. Either way, it's still getting stored. So let's get into the basics of what trauma is and what it looks like within your body. When trauma happens, it's the moment that something activates us and switches us into fight or flight because there's a reason. Because there is something that is triggering us and is coming through and we're processing it as being a potential threat. Trauma happens to everyone, and depending on your age and your circumstances, it may happen more often or less often. And the brain, when it experiences trauma of any type, what happens is the autonomic nervous system switches on. Let me go even more basic. Let me just dial it back for a second. I've talked about this before, but we have a long nerve that runs down our body, the vagus nerve. It starts right at the base of the brain and moves down the spine. And this vagus nerve regulates our autonomic nervous system. It pumps adrenaline and cortisol when we have some kind of stress that's coming in, something that feels triggering. And what that does is it sends blood and energy to our extremities so that we can fight, so that we can run, so that we can freeze and play dead if we have to. Because we need those things in order to stay safe. We need this. This is evolutionary. The unfortunate thing is that when we have trauma, this gets activated and we don't know how to regulate it. We don't know how to stop things from re-triggering it. And so anything that looks slightly like our initial trigger, even if it's small, will re-trigger us and we'll go right back into that trauma state, just like we did the first time that it happened. And it really is evolutionary. The body is trying to take care of us in those moments. The body is trying to do everything that it can to keep us from creating more damage than is necessary. So it's beautiful that the body does this. But unfortunately, what happens for many of us is the body, which is this whole area from your neck down, understands, okay, we need to switch into gear. We need to send out the adrenaline and the cortisol. We need to run. We need to fight. We need to play dead, whatever it is that we are required to do in that moment to keep ourselves safe. The body gets it. And the brain afterwards is like, I don't know if we want to remember that. Maybe we shouldn't store that in the right channels. Maybe we should twist this memory in some way. Maybe we should shift it into the unconscious and try and just forget about it. And so our brain and our body end up being disconnected, because if that happens, if the brain makes the decision to put it somewhere and to move it out of the conscious mind and just stuff it somewhere, what happens is that the body sees a trigger and you start going into fight or flight. The adrenaline and the cortisol start to pump and you don't understand why. You're just feeling triggered and you can't figure out what the reason is. And we all have this happen to us. Think about the last time that you started to have all those bodily responses of your heart pounding, your palms sweating, you need to run away or to scream or to cry or to fight, and you can't figure out what the source was. And really, if you trace it back, you could probably figure it out, but knowing the original source, the root of the problem, is life-changing, because all of a sudden it all starts to make sense. So let me give you guys like a real-world example of this. I'm a cancer survivor, and when I was going through cancer, everything was traumatic. Everything, because the whole thing, it was out of nowhere, no one could figure out why, blah, 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 all those. And so I actually blacked out a period of time as I was going through that. I don't remember a couple of months because my brain doesn't want me to remember them, because Maybe it thinks that if those came back through, it would be harmful. Maybe it thinks that it would be detrimental for me to see that again or to experience it because I went into a dark place. And if we re-traumatize ourselves, we're not necessarily helping. What we want to do is understand where it came from so that we can heal it, so that we can understand why things are triggering. And so, like I said, periods of time blacked out, no memories of them. But what would happen is I would just move about my life day to day and random things would trigger me and I would move into fight or flight. Something as simple as seeing a butter knife slicing something, and my whole body would remember the feeling of being in surgery and having my stomach sliced open, and my brain didn't remember because I wasn't awake for that. I don't know. And it was like cold sweats, chills, wanting to cry, wanting to throw up, freaking out. And the way to get through that, the way to stop that process, is to actually get to the root of the problem and heal the trauma and make it go away. All of us have triggers. And trauma doesn't have to be that big. Trauma can actually be smaller things too. Think to times when you were under the age of 5 and maybe someone bullied you, someone told you that you weren't good enough. And in those moments as a 5-year-old, that feels like the world is crumbling, like everything is falling apart, right? It feels horrifying when you're 5 years old to be told that you aren't good enough or we don't want you to play with us. And so your body will actually take that and store it as a trauma because in that moment you activate into fight or flight. In that moment you want to cry, you want to scream, you want to run and tell someone, you want to hide, whatever it is that feels like the best way for you to protect yourself, you feel that. And maybe your brain does the exact same thing where it goes, we don't want her to have bad self-esteem, let's put this somewhere, let's get rid of it. But then you hear it again from someone else. Like maybe you go and audition for something and they tell you you weren't good enough. And all of a sudden, boom, there it is again. And your whole body activates. Your whole body feels it. And it feels like the crushing weight coming down over you. And it doesn't make sense related to what just happened because, yeah, that was disappointing when that happened just now, but it didn't feel soul crushing. But if we add that up on top of the time when it originally happened, now we understand. Now we see where this trauma is coming from. And so shadow work is the process of going into the unconscious mind and clearing it out so that there's no disconnect in between the brain and the body. So that the brain and the body are completely seamless. Everything starts to make sense. And when they communicate well, what happens is the brain doesn't need to hide things from you anymore. It can trust that you're going to regulate it and know what to do with the information as it comes. Your body is able to control your mind is able to control your body. They start acting as a unit. Think about how life-changing that would be for most of us, right? From the time that we're young, we're essentially taught everything that we think is not true. Think about having a pretend friend, like an imaginary friend when you're young, and people telling you, that's not real, that's fake. Well, I was thinking it was real, and I thought it was real, but now I have to question my thoughts. Now I have to question my understanding of the world. And now I'm going to have more of a disconnect because I can't trust myself anymore. And this happens over and over and over again. It's the little kid who sings a song and someone says, can you stop singing? You suck. And all of a sudden, well, I thought I was good. I was just having fun. I wasn't even trying to be good. Whatever it is that we think, we have a disconnect. The brain and the body start acting separately. Because now the body is not able to forget what happened. The body is not able to store things in the unconscious, but the brain can. And so when the brain puts things into the unconscious and we can't find it anymore, we can't access it, we don't know why our body is reacting like this. Our body is just having a meltdown with no known cause. But there is a cause. We just don't know how to find it. And this is why shadow work is so transformative. Shadow work is the process of putting yourself into such a deep meditative state with a guide there to help you, that your body is regulated, that your body is calm, that you are actually activating the other half of the autonomic nervous system, which is the parasympathetic, and you're so calm and so rested that the walls within your mind that keep things hidden from you come down. And when they come down, we can slowly extract those moments, the ones that your mind is trying to hide from you, and bring them to the surface and heal them. The more we're able to do that, the more we're able to go in and do that work to really heal these parts of ourselves, the better we feel. The more connected we feel within our body, because our brain and our body are now communicating properly the way that they were always meant to. Our brain and our body don't have a disconnect anymore. It's just seamless. And so we don't have those intense reactions anymore. We don't get triggered into fight or flight unless there's something that is actually a real threat in front of us that we need to address. It'll stop happening when we have things like a stressful moment or feeling out of control, because those are really just triggers from past traumas. And when we see those happen in people, we know that there's shadow work to be done. There's things that need to be pulled out of that space so that we can address them and heal them and make them go away. And now this gets a little bit more complicated here, so bear with me. We also have an aura. Everybody has an aura, and it extends somewhere between 3 to 5 feet out of your body. And this is just essentially energy. We're all protons and electrons at our core. That's all we are. We're energy. We're masses of energy. And these auras that we have, they have layers. There's the physical, which is the closest one in towards us, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual. And each one extends on top of the one before it. And so when we are blocking trauma and it's manifesting within the body and it's stuck, essentially, it's also stuck in your aura. So it can be stuck in the physical sense that you start having aches and pains that you don't understand why you're having them, and it makes no sense. It could be stuck in the sense that emotionally, you just are very quick to react with tears or anger, and you can't figure out why. That's a hint that there's a block within that layer of the aura. Mentally, it could be things like brain fog or cycling thoughts that just keep going back and forth through the same thing over and over again. Or even as extreme as things like obsessive compulsive disorder, where you start having these impulsive thoughts, these things that you can't control, and you don't understand why they keep creeping up on you. And then the spiritual is the last layer. And all of these layers of the aura, when they're blocked up with different things, we tend to move about the world in a way where things feel hard. Things get stuck. It feels painful almost to go throughout life, because it's like there's just so much sludge stuck to the bottom of our feet and we're trying to just walk. We just want to move. And the more we can clear this stuff out, the more we can really create a seamless connection in between the body and the brain. The more we can actually speak to those traumas, see them, understand why they happened, give ourselves permission to be sad about them, to heal from them, the more we're able to pull the sludge out, the more it moves out of our aura, the more it feels like it's not connected to us anymore, it's not bringing us down anymore, and we move in a way that's more free. We're not as quick to jump to the emotions. It's not like we're constantly crying or screaming or confused. Don't have as much brain fog. It doesn't feel like we have those impulsive or cyclical thoughts that sneak up on us. We have more clarity with our body, where we're not having these random aches and pains that we can't address. I've had so many people who've done shadow work with me before, whether through the Create Your Light Academy or through one-to-ones, who had physical symptoms that they couldn't figure out, who emotionally were just like always at the brink of losing it a little bit emotionally, who had all kinds of running thoughts through their mind that were stopping them from being able to do what they want to do. And we just clear them all out. We clear them all out and we make them go away. And so I want to hear from you guys a little bit, both the ones who are watching on Facebook and the ones who are watching on Instagram, if this feels like it relates to you. If you understand what trauma feels like in your body. And it feels basically at the core the same, but there's some differences depending on who you are and how many times you've experienced it. Maybe what are the triggers that you experience? Do you know when it's happening to you, or are you walking around blind? Does it feel confusing and you don't understand why you're having a panic attack, or why you can't be on the edge of something because heights freak you out, or why you can't see spiders? It's like you just saw a bear running at you. There's a reason why we experience these things. There's some trauma living within the body when we have that. There's something there that needs to be addressed. It can even be as simple as being home for Thanksgiving and being around your family members and just feeling like you want to scream. Not because you don't love them, but because very often when we go back into those settings, we feel so re-traumatized because our family members unintentionally have been a part of the original trauma. It just happens. No one is immune to trauma. Everybody experiences it to different degrees. And we all do the same thing where we disconnect the brain and the body to protect ourselves. So you're not alone in this. And I'm here to tell you that this is not something you have to live with. This is not something that you have to keep dealing with every day. You shouldn't. You shouldn't be dealing with this every day. Life is meant to be easy. Life is meant to be effortless. And so when we actually heal these things, we start calling in the things that we want. We start having a job that's aligned with what we want because we won't settle for less, and we know what it feels like to be somewhere that doesn't appreciate us, or somewhere that stifles us, or somewhere that re-traumatizes us. We start having relationships that do the same. We feel really good in these relationships because we understand what our traumas look like and our triggers look like, and we won't call those in anymore. Our businesses tend to take off because as we clear all this stuff out of the aura, we start extending the aura out. Instead of being 3 to 5 feet in width, it can extend out to 10 or 20 feet. And then you're magnetic. And then you're calling in everything that you want. Everything, because you become a magnet. You become so magnetizing because, remember, we're all energy. All we are is electrons and protons made up in this physical shape. And so the bigger your aura, the more you're going to call in the things that you want, the more magnetic you're going to be. Shadow work is so key for 2 reasons. On the surface, it's going to make you magnetic. It's going to make you call in everything that you want. It's going to make your life amazing. And then underneath the surface, it's just going to make all the things that are weighing you down healed. It's going to help them go away. It's going to bring ease into your life. So on every level, you start becoming the best version of yourself. You start living the life you've always wanted to have. You start having the ease that you've dreamt about and felt like you deserve and haven't been able to get to. Shadow work is everything. Shadow work is the answer to everything. When I was still studying psychology, we talked a lot about different ways to help people work through trauma, different things that would help them reconnect that brain and that body disconnect. But one of the things that never sat well with me, that I never really understood is, well, what do we do about the stuff that's unconscious? What do we do about the things that we can't see? Because really, that's the stuff that's really, really going to have the biggest impact. All that stuff that's under the surface. If we imagine sort of like looking at an iceberg, there's the part that's above the water that you can see. That's like your conscious. And it's there and it's big, but there's more under the surface. There's the subconscious, the stuff you can kind of peek into the water and sort of see, but you don't have to look down at it. It's up to you. And then you have all the stuff, the miles underneath that of unconscious, all the iceberg that exists under the water that's just too deep down for you to see. And that's where your life changes. Because that's the stuff, when you take that out, that's the bulk of it. Your mind is primarily your unconscious. Your mind is made up of mostly your unconscious. And so you're often doing things that you don't realize why you're doing them. You think things in your mind about the way that the world is. You have automatic thoughts of, well, that's just not the way that it's done. Says who? Who taught you that? Because someone did. Someone taught you that that's the way that the world works. And trauma does the same thing. When we experience trauma, we learn something about the way the world works. We learn that things are going to be hard for us, that we're going to struggle, that things aren't going to go the way that we planned, that we need to try and control our environment to protect ourselves from having that again. Add in anything else that you can think of, and that becomes your inner voice. And so you do everything based around these ideas. In the neuroscience standpoint, what that looks like is we develop neural pathways, which are just long chains of neurons connecting to one another that transmit information. But they form in such a way that our experiences dictate the path they're going to take. And so if my life is really easy and I was born into the lap of luxury and things just go well and everything, I'm like lady luck, everything goes really well, my neural pathways will arrange themselves in such a way that I expect that to continue. And most likely it will, because if I'm expecting it, I'm looking for it. If I'm looking for it, I'm going to find it. So if we experience trauma, especially trauma at a young age, what happens is the brain wires itself to expect things not to go well, for things to be hard, for our life to feel out of control, for us to need to keep ourselves safe. And that becomes the basis of your thoughts. Where you're at a party and you're looking for the exit because you need to keep yourself safe. Because here's the list of reasons why this could go horribly. Because I don't want to be put in a situation where I might feel X, Y, or Z. And it's all unconscious. You don't even realize that it's not the normal thing to do. And there's no such thing as normal, so just throw that out. That it's not the only way that it has to be. Your brain can be whatever you want it to be. Your experiences can be whatever you want them to be. But you have to be willing to go in and do the deep work to heal the trauma. You can't ignore it. Every single person on the planet needs to do trauma work. There is no one that's immune. There's no one that's immune, because even if it hasn't happened to you in this life, it's happened to you in a past life, and we have hundreds or thousands of those. And so there is always something there that's pulling you back. And so you can think about it. Think about the automatic thoughts that you have, the ways that you keep yourself small, the things that trigger you into fight or flight. So your heart pounding, palms sweating, mind racing, feeling like you can't breathe, feeling tension in your chest or your shoulders. You'll know it when you see it. And when you do, that's where you need to go in. That's where you need to figure out why there's a disconnect, because your body is having a trauma reaction. Your mind doesn't know what the hell is happening. And it's time for you to figure it out. And so that's it for today. Next week, I'll come in and talk more shadow work stuff. Let me know. I want to hear from you guys. What do you want to hear about? What feels like more that you want to know? What is it about the shadow or trauma or past lives that you are dying to find out, so that I can bring that stuff to you? I'll see you all next week, everybody. Bye.